everybody, and welcome back to the Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. We have a bit of a different video here, joined by my co-creator, co-commentator, co-caster, co-compatriot Rob.
Hello.
Haven't put out anything in 3 weeks or so. There's really not a ton that is interesting us that we find interesting. Not a lot of like super big events. I guess we could have covered like Amsterdam or whatever, but I think it's it's a little bit too far gone. I mean, Missouri won, that was cool, but
Yeah.
I think most people are kind of full steam ahead on Rosetta at this point. But the Armory decks that have been coming out, the Bolton deck and the Azalea slash Riptide deck, we're gonna call it,
Yeah.
has piqued people's interest. And I have to admit that Riptide is not a deck I put a ton of time into, but lately I've been putting more energy into it because Riptide has that kind of interesting position that I think he's actually fairly well positioned for the Mistveil meta, and I think he can be even more well positioned when you add in the Rosetta heroes because these traps seem to be doing a lot of good work until like the new Runeblade coming out, these traps stopping really go wide turns. I think he can have like the Wizards. I always get against the Wizards, although life gain, I'm not really sure. Point is that I think he could be a pretty good answer to a lot of different heroes, and I think it's finally time to experiment a little more with aim counters because it's really never been a thing that's
Yep.
never been a thing that's been explored. Is that a sentence? It is now.
It is now. Yeah.
So we're gonna start with Riptide here. I have my Fabry page, and we're gonna build this deck from scratch, and we're gonna focus on an aim counter related, deck here, right?
So I guess first question that I have actually is like, why all of a sudden aim counters? Is there like a powerful new effect that came out that made us interested in aim counters, or is there any mechanic that came out specifically with the Azalea
Yeah,
deck? Yeah.
yeah. So I think the first point is like aim counter support. So cards that are actually like just not garbage that add aim counters to the suite. So beforehand, it was really just like Sanskar Great Bow was the main bow that was being used here to, actually have an
Add aim
engine.
counters.
Yeah, have an engine. Yeah, and
Yeah.
the payoff wasn't great. We had like Hemorrhage Bore, and we have a couple other cards like Deadeye was obviously a pretty good buff, but you can kind of use Deadeye without the aim counter, and it's like still an okay
Still
buff.
fine.
Blocks for 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
still fine.
but I think realistically speaking, there wasn't enough to go on. But now Riptide using Barbed Castaway and New Horizons is able to really accelerate the value and have more disruptive on hits, whereas Azalea is really prone to a little bit more
The
disruption. Like
luck of the draw too, right? Because of her
yes,
crow's nest, it was more dependent on her
yes,
getting lucky with an arrow. Riptide can
yes.
do it a lot better, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the idea here is that your traps give you a lot of like toolkit versatility, whereas the extra arrows gave you toolkit versatility for Azalea. So we're going to focus on kind of like a main board with some arrows, a decent curve. I'm thinking probably 10 to 12 blues ish, depending on what kind of disruption we're packing here. But we're going to start with the weapon here. So we got a couple of options. If we go to bow, so we have Castaway, Death Dealer, Dreadbore, Sandscour, Greatbow, and Redliner. Realistically speaking, if I was going more aggressive, I would probably lean more into Death Dealer. However, we're focused more on the aim counter. So really, Barb Castaway is the main piece. I think Greatbow is only good in like very very arrow dense decks. So I think Azalea would be more akin to. I mean, I don't think. I guess you can use Barb Castaway on Azalea. It doesn't actually say Riptide on it, which is pretty funny. I think the Quiver is the one that says Riptide on it, but
Yeah.
Barb Castaway you could technically use with Azalea. But I think Great Bow is better used there just because like your arrow density is just so much higher in general with those kinds of builds. Whereas Riptide does have those traps to take up a piece of your deck. You're not gonna have that much density. So I think Barb Castaway adding this as the main weapon is fine because you're able to either put a card from hand face up that you can use either on the first arrow or the second arrow because you can like Riptide and put the first arrow with your ability into the arsenal, fire it
Yeah,
off.
it pairs pretty well with his hero ability. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then Dreadbore, we're gonna kind of like ignore for now. I think it's really just a matter of probably okay in the sideboard, but I'm gonna ignore like major sideboard pieces for now. So
I
I think
almost
that's
forgot what Dreadboard did. I had to like look it up. It's been
yeah,
so long. Yeah.
Dreadbore it's a good counter bow, but at the moment I'm thinking about like how the deck's gonna function first, right? So
Yeah.
that's fine. We got our Barb Castaway.
Cool.
Taking off the zoom
Quiver
here.
next, I guess.
Yeah, we can go quiver. So
Might as well.
let's
It's a pseudo
let's
weapon, I guess.
yeah. So really, like
Uh,
your options are driftwood, abyssal depths, or rustling leaves. I think realistically you have to pick abyssal depths only because let me
yeah.
put it in the middle here. Just because you are still prone to fatigue. You don't actually have a weapon. So this particular deck, eventually you can grind out with like value arrows and traps. However, later in the game, there are decks that will just like straight up want to fatigue you, right? A lot of
Yeah.
like the Axe Story, Guardians, decks like that who can just keep having a lot of 3 blocks and blocking you out.
hmm
You're gonna
Yeah.
need this quiver to close out the game most likely. So I think it's just way better than the other two pieces,
Yeah, I
personally.
agree. The Rustling Leaves, I think, has the problem where if you're not running too many arrows in your deck, you're going to whiff a lot more often with it. And the Driftwood Quiver, it kind of overlaps a little bit with the chess piece. If we end up going with the Sunken Treasure chess piece. So yeah, my vote would be the
Exactly.
Abyssal Depths too. Yeah.
Now that you said Sunken Treasure, we're going to put that in there. This is just his quintessential chess piece. I don't see Hidden Agenda, which is the new one that gives you, like, AB1 is the same as Trench, and then the instant being able to, like, gain one to turn a. It doesn't actually give you an aim counter on it, it just turns it face up to
Yeah.
gain a pitch. If it said also gain an aim counter, you're getting a little spicier because then
Yeah.
at least you don't
Yeah.
have a blocking equipment, but you get that value in the aim counter, which is on damage arrows, it's usually +1
Yeah.
with like infecting shot, or it gives you like piercing on drill shot and stuff like that. So for those facts, I think you just take the legendary chess piece. I don't
I
think
agree.
that's gonna.
Disruption prevention too. If they CNC you, just dump something to the bottom of your deck, prevent or help towards the anti-fatigue goal of saving your stuff. So, yep, I
Yes,
think it's just made for Riptide. Yeah.
yes. Legs wise, we have Perch Grapplers and Flight Path for the Ranger legs. Snapdragon Scalers for a more aggressive build is probably what I would pick if I were going on Death Dealer Riptide. However, in this piece, the armor is actually quite valuable, and because we're going to go for an aim counter focus list, we are going to pick Flight Path because it does give you your Battle Lord 1, and it does give you Go Again for as an attack
Mhm.
reaction for an arrow with aim counter. I think that's a no-brainer. I don't really think Perch Grapplers is
Yeah.
really giving you
You
much
get the
more.
extra block with Perch Grapplers, but you don't get the ability. So it's nice to be able to block once and then use the card afterwards for the ability. And the ability synergizes super well with what we're trying to do. Get kind of the aggressive go again, like snaps, but you get to have it kind of on any costed arrow. So even if you put an aim counter
Yep.
on like a huge arrow that costs 2, you can still give it go again.
Yep, that's true. It's I doubt many people are even thinking about that because Azalea is
Yeah.
like, oh, a bunch of zero cost arrows with like
Yeah,
bonus
yeah,
arrow
yeah.
and
It's
stuff like
not
that.
very common to play those huge arrows, but it's
Yeah,
it's an application that could come up. So I think
yep,
it's yeah, yep, good
that's
choice.
true. Sharpshooter for the arm slot. I think this is also just kind of a no brainer. It's got your one battle worn, so you're actually rocking like you're starting to rock a fair amount of armor on a ranger, which is
Not
kind
a
of unheard
ranger,
of.
yeah.
Uh,
That's true.
puts but the most thing the biggest thing this thing does this arm piece does is it puts the aim counter on, right? So it gives you a on demand aim counter on any arrow in the arsenal, depending no matter the cost. It allows you to get disruption on
Mhm.
demand if it's a disruptive arrow or any kind of extra buff, and then you can combine it with flight path immediately, right? So
Mhm.
you're able to use them in tandem. I think these pieces go super well together.
Yep.
I don't really think there's another another piece I would really
Yeah, this
want.
is currently best in class for the arm piece, I think. Bullseye Bracers is maybe more for an aggressive endless arrow kind of build, but I think that giving the aim counter is exactly what we want, and it's free once per game. So yeah, and armor,
Exactly.
one piece of
Yes,
armor, it's nice.
it's true. So we have the last piece we're missing here is the helmet. The helmet we're actually gonna. I mean, I think I
Head,
mentioned it before. Head. Oh,
yeah, I made that
actually,
mistake.
there we go. Head. New Horizons is so you get the 2 armor for sure. Funnily enough, it's not super necessary to always have the 2 arsenal slots, especially later in the game. So like the 2 block
Yes,
actually
yeah.
can be relevant. And I think the target totalizer, the new headpiece here, doesn't give block and then just allows you to draw a card when an arrow with aim counter hits this turn. So it
Yeah,
has to hit, and it's an action, so it's not a trick. So it's not like
right, right.
instant speed where it's like, oh, it hits, and then I can activate this if I want to draw a card.
Yeah,
And I don't think I'm gonna be hitting with like if I hit with one, that's cool. I don't even think I'm hitting with more than one. So at most, this card's probably just draw a card,
yeah.
which
which is still going to be hard to do because the opponent's going to be very incentivized to block this as an action, right?
If
Like
it
you said, no
especially
tricks with this. Yeah.
exactly. So it's like, oh yeah, you can have like rain razors if like they might think you might have rain razors, but even then, there's not a
Yeah.
ton of not a ton of tricks you can do in the Riptide deck.
Which we might not even run in Riptide. I don't know if it's a staple in
No,
Riptide in this build specifically because we're not really going
yeah,
that wide.
we're
So
not.
there are not many things that can buff the arrow after you've given it the on hit effect. So yeah, and no block too, like you said. The New Horizon can be used pretty easily late game unless you have an Arsenal card,
Yep.
so you don't really want to. But 2 armor late game to give up one of your Arsenal slots is not the end of the world. So
Oh yeah. No, 100%. Riptide is able to get cards in the arsenal pretty easily, even with one
right,
slot, so it's not really that big of a deal.
yeah,
That's our equipment suite. We're gonna move on to the arrows now. So we're gonna start with the kind of red arrow based, then yellows and blues. I mean, yellows. I don't think we're running yellow arrows, but the fact is, for the red arrows, we are not spoiled for choice, but we have quite a few to choose from. So in this
hmm
particular deck, we're going down the list on the left here. We're gonna start with battering bolts. So we're gonna have 3 battering bolts. Now the reason is
Hopper.
because it is a popper. It's very good against the Mystic Heroes, which was seen with Azalea. Azaleas can't really run 3 of them. Now, I'm going to run a lot more blues than Azalea, so I think running 3 is fine. It also has the added benefit of having like that very reasonable on hit effect because the more kind of instant shenanigans, especially with the new set coming out, a lot of no blocks, a lot of instants. So it's gonna make this like in the wizards and stuff like that.
Transcend cards, right? If you
Yep,
can't get
transcend
those
cards.
off, yeah.
Yep, exactly. So I think there's more and more situations where battering bull is just very good current and future, and everything else is kind of good as like stat line 2 for 6 blocks 3.
Yep. Yeah, well
It's just a
statted
very
card.
reasonable, yeah, it's just a reasonable arrow.
It's a huge arrow too. If you buff it by 3, it's a 2 for 9, right? It's
Yeah.
still really, really strong, really hard to block out. And like you said, illusionists play a lot of instants. If they can't pay for them all and they can't block this card, then they're losing 1 to 2 extra health. Or
Yep.
you get, sorry. Oh yeah, they lose health for every non-action. So yeah, they can lose an extra few
Yes.
pieces of health there.
Yeah.
So
So yeah,
really good.
it does force them to kind of use whatever they possibly can here, and if they can't,
And
they
if they're using
lose
it,
life.
they usually take damage from the attacks and not blocking you out. So it's
Exactly.
kind of like a twofold thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The next one here we're gonna do is drill shot. Now this is pretty obvious. Azalea runs this. There's no reason Riptide's not gonna run 3 of these. It's a 0 for 4 arrow, which we're gonna need a pretty decent amount because we're gonna have some combos that are just 0 cost pump. You have a 2 card hand. You're able to get that arrow in the arsenal with your Riptide ability for free, and then fire it for essentially a 2 card 7, right? With some kind of on hit,
Not a
like
buff.
the yeah, with the drill shot already has an on hit with a -1 counter, but like for like
Right.
seek and destroy and stuff like that,
Yeah.
the premeditate getting a ponder, things like that. So you're able to pretty easily make use of your 0 cost arrows. So drill shot's going to be the obvious one because the aim counter getting piercing 1 is pretty reasonable. It's not the best, but for a 0 cost arrow, it's like
0
the
costs 4 damage too, which does make the opponent want to use like the 1 piece of armor to
armor.
block out the
Yes,
full value, so they can't do that anymore with the one aim
piercing.
counter. Yeah.
Yeah, with the piercing giving it the +1, they're not able to give you like a 3 block and a 1 block armor, or like a 1 battle worn or something like that. They're not able to fully block. They have to give you a full 2
Yeah.
block armor, which is quite nice. So it's effectively like the drill shot's hitting anyways, because you were probably going to put 1 on that armor regardless. But
Yeah, that's true.
it's forcing the hand. Endless Arrow is interesting. So Bolden Shot we're not going to run. I passed it by really quickly. This is not a go wide deck. This is not like if
Right.
this was like an aggressive Death Dealer deck, I would consider Bolden Shot a lot more. But this deck is not aiming to
Yep.
shoot off a lot of value with Bolden Shot. With Bolden Shot, I
Yeah.
also think cards like Bullseye Bracer and Snaps would be a better choice with Bolden Shot. Specifically Bullseye because it'll give you +1, so it's like the free go again for Bolden Shot and when you can reload off of it. But for here, that's just not really what we're going for. So we're just gonna slide on over Bolden Shot and look at Endless Arrow. I think we're gonna put 1 in the maybe pile is what we were thinking, just because we're gonna look at it later to see how much space we have in the deck. The issue is that
Yeah.
again, we're not really a go. We don't have snaps, so the Endless Arrow kind of good value combo where you just like snaps and you're able to threaten more with the bullseye and keep that card and go for like
Yeah.
a 2+ card wide turn. It's not. I don't want to put an aim counter on this card to activate
Yeah.
my
You would need to use it with the
boots.
flight path. Yeah.
Yeah, let that be such a waste to like use your arms and legs on Endless Arrow. So I think that it might be pretty good for value just into like the more fatiguey decks. So
Right.
I'm gonna put this on the side to see if we have space for it, but it's not one of my front runners here.
And
So
not more than 1 for sure. Like one maybe, and
Correct.
then just for the
Yeah,
anti-fatigue strategy.
exactly. So it might be like a sideboard piece, but I don't know if I want to run it in the main board right now. Scrolling
Sounds
down
good.
for the next arrows, fatigue shot, hamstring shot. These are all like the one cost arrows that don't. They're good for like Azalea as like toolbox arrows, but in this particular
Yep.
meta, I'm looking for like the most bang for your buck. Neither
Hmm.
of these really help. The aim counters don't do anything to these arrows. We're looking more
Yeah.
for, if we can, for arrows that have a positive effect with an aim counter. Heat Seeker,
And more disruptive, I guess, too.
yes, more
Um,
disruptive. I mean, Fatigue Shot is pretty good in the meta for KO specifically and Guardian Victor for
yeah,
Guardian. So
that's
it,
true.
it it does have a use, but we also run a bunch of traps. So unlike Azalea, we don't have to rely on offensive defense, which is Fatigue Shot, right? Like it's offensive
Mhm.
defense. We have actual defense with traps. So
Yeah, right,
we're
right.
not no, we're not as reliant on needing these arrows that are very narrow, right? Because like if the
Narrow
meta is a
arrows.
bunch of, yeah, like fatigue charges doesn't do anything for new or assassin, which are all the rage. Doesn't do anything for Zen, so
Hmm.
it's not really something I want to be drawing there. None of the other arrows are super interesting until we get to
Yeah.
immobilizing shot.
What do you
Uh,
think about? I know Heat Seeker is pretty much a staple in Azalea, or it's great to get an extra card after you hit. So, do you think this fits in Riptide?
well, I think Heatseeker was a staple more in like the New Horizon Lexi, because you got
Oh,
the extra
yeah.
piece here. Now,
Sorry, not Lexi. Yeah, sorry.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
same difference.
Same difference. Yeah.
My issue is it has no on hit, and oh, sorry, it has an on hit, but it doesn't have a disruptive on hit, nor does
Right.
it have an aim counter positive. So it doesn't have any like buffs from getting an aim counter on it, which I'm fine with having arrows that don't necessarily do that kind of give me an aim counter and I give you disruption. However, it doesn't have either. Like I would like at least one. And then if
Fair.
we have
Yeah.
space, we can go through and see what we have space for, because I think it's gonna be quite limited based on our actual lists, right? So
Yep. And we're
let's
not
get that.
necessarily going for that kind of value too. I guess it's
No.
like we're not thriving on an insane value turn where you can just keep playing cards, get one card, fill the arsenal. It's like you're trying to be disruptive and you're trying to play the game plan where you're getting incremental advantage, I guess, with
Yeah,
this deck.
yeah. I don't think we'll really need to, because we're gonna have Riptide's ability to put cards in the arsenal better than Lexi and Azalea could.
Azalea. Right.
So I don't think. Well, it's just like you won't run Hugh or Azalea, but like in general, that kind of effect for Lexi was like, well, Lexi couldn't put anything in the arsenal other than Voltaire, right? So
Hmm.
Heatseeker able to actually get you a 6 card hand with double arsenal was super necessary, because you weren't able to necessarily um,
Use an
extend and
ability.
arsenal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So
Now,
immobilizing shot then.
yeah, this is a 3 of. So if we go to Moveling Shot, it has kind of this is one of those dynasty cards when the aim counters came out, right? So when it has the aim counter, it gives you your disruption. This is going to be super good now into go wide decks, and also super good into like Aurora, which is like your future
Hmm.
go wide deck for Rosetta, right? One attack action, one non-attack action. Go wide decks usually want to play more than one attack action. That's just generally how it goes.
Oh yeah.
And it also serves a good purpose for decks that, if they particularly, it'll put slower decks into more awkward spots also. And like if you don't want to put in, if you don't want to put an aim counter on this, it's still a 0 for 4, and it still serves as a good base arrow, like a good vanilla arrow to put like a +3, but like a Seek and Destroy on, like that kind of thing. You don't
Yeah.
always need. It's not like Azalea where you want like a million buffs on one arrow because you have Dominate to force it through. That's not really the goal here. So you don't have that kind of dominate on demand, I guess, depending on when you Azalea. So I think it's also a good source for a lot of what you're trying to do. So it's quite good. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
quite well served in the meta.
Makes sense.
Um, skipping over like the arrows that don't really
The
do.
filler arrows.
Yeah, infecting shot's good. In not good in, I don't think it's great in this meta. I don't think damage is really going to be our major issue. So
Yeah.
like getting the, and it's just like, oh, I can get a 1 for 6 with a. I want more from my aim counter than a +1, and I'm already at 1 for 5. A 1 for 6 is just 2/3 blocks. Like it doesn't really
Yeah.
give you that much more.
And I would say
So
generally, paying one for the aim counter for one damage is usually not really worth it.
mhm.
Like the one pip for one damage is it's kind of a bad deal. So
Yeah,
especially in a deck like this, right? So I think yeah, I agree completely.
I'm gonna put 2 Merkmeyer grapnels, and the reason I'm gonna put 2 is that
Murkmire.
I
All
think you
right.
need at least one. So 0 for 4 again, good stat line, but I think you need at least one because illusionists are like probably one of your worst matchups in my opinion.
Mm.
Um, and I think as time goes by, there's just going to be more and more illusions in the meta as things sort of balance out. So I think being able to have this versus Enigma specifically, also very good versus Prism if they have a bunch of angels on board, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
quite versatile. The aim counter giving it +1 is fine. It's not
It's
like
nice, but not the main
yeah,
idea.
yeah, like the thing is like if you barb Castaway and pay 1 to give this +1, at least there's a source. Like at least it does something. You know what I mean? You don't have to use your arms for the aim counter. Barb Castaway can just you could Riptide, put a buff,
Right.
Riptide this, it's face down, pay
And
1,
then,
Castaway, use a buff, like a 1 cost buff, and then you use
yeah,
one, to give this another +1 with an aim counter, right? So it's not that bad. It still gives you incremental value, but it's a 0 cost instead of infecting shot, which you still already have to pay 1.
yeah, yeah.
So
You'll have the
it's
resource to be able to use the castaway, use a buff,
yeah.
like a one cost buff.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we'll leave it there for now.
You said just one or
Uh,
two?
I put
Two of
two
these?
in here. Yeah, I feel like whenever I put one, I never see it when I need it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm never gonna like I don't want to put three because I don't want to see two of these in my hand.
Yeah.
So
But it's true. So yeah, exactly. Into the matches where it doesn't really matter that much, it's still fine. 0 for 4. You'll still play it or block with it. But in the matches where you're against an illusionist and you don't see it, it's like much worse, right? Than
yeah,
seeing it in a match that you don't really care much about. So I
exactly.
agree. All
Murky
right.
Water. I mean, I'm gonna zoom. I'm gonna expand this card one more time, just so
Enhance,
everyone can see
CSI
it. Yeah, I'm
enhance.
gonna I'm gonna enhance this one for everybody. So this is the Riptide Special Edition coming from Misfail. It added a lot of power to this deck because not only does the aim counter give it +1, it gives it Dominate, which as you can
Which
see
we
is one step up here,
Yeah,
which we
it
have
gets
not
a
had.
slice of Azalea in this deck, right?
It does. And the on hit getting you a random trap out of 3 face down traps is you don't get to pick the trap you actually get, but you do get to pick the traps it picks from. And your opponent doesn't know which one goes in there. So you banish the 3 face down traps and then you choose one at random, put it in the arsenal. You don't flip it up. So your opponent doesn't actually know which one got picked other than you.
Yeah, they'll have an idea, but they won't know exactly what it is.
Exactly. Being able to pick like a legendary trap back
Oh
is
yeah.
super good. Like imagine that you're just like later in the game and you have 3 legendary traps and you just select the
Hmm.
legendary traps and say like go nuts. It's
Yeah.
good because you can pinpoint traps that are more likely to hit your particular opponent in that stage of the game, right? So
Yeah.
it
Right.
gives you better flexibility, and +1 dominate means it's more likely to hit. It's a
It's that
pretty
7 breakpoint
flexible.
as well.
Yeah, it's a 7 dominate. You can give this +3 with a whole bunch of stuff to give it more on hit, so it can again have a pseudo kind of idea. So it costs 2, so you can pitch. So if this is you can
Yeah.
let's say like
So you
seek and
can like
destroy.
premeditate it, so you can destroy. Yeah,
Yeah,
Riptide,
exactly.
Riptide the
Riptide
arrow
this.
in,
Yeah, exactly. Riptide it. Pay 1
Barbed
to barb castaway.
Castaway,
Yes, exactly. So then you have your 3 pitch. Like that's your blue right there, right? 2 for Murky
and that's
Water
a
and 1 for Castaway.
10 dominate on this card, which is awesome.
You're almost Azalea. So let's
Yeah,
look at
and
it.
no kind of like guarantee too, because you don't really need the volatility of having to get an arrow off the top unless you use like a knock death wish. So at least with this, it'll work right away.
Exactly. Rolling on to the next page here, Remorseless is still extremely useful for your. It's one of those cards where no, it doesn't have an aim counter effect, but it does so much random splash damage where, if it's put into the arsenal face up from like Barb Castaway. So that's the key. You don't want to Riptide this if you want to use the
Mm,
ability, right? You need this to be put face up. Defense reactions
yeah,
can't be played from the arsenal, which is really good splash damage if someone is trying to block and or fatigue you. They are likely going to be running D reacts. Also, even some of the more aggressive decks are running D reacts nowadays.
yeah.
So it could hit you there. But the more important one, if it hits a hero until the end of the next turn, when they play an action card, so non-attacks and attack actions, they lose 1 life. And this is what kind of stops, like makes your like go wide decks stop and think about how much damage are you actually taking, because
Yeah.
it's very good versus Rune Blades because it affects non-attacks also, and it's also very good against ninjas who might only play attack actions, but it still hits them quite hard.
Crouching tigers take 1
Yeah,
damage.
like a 1 for 5 and going into a 1 for 8, 1 for 9, 1 for 10, like it gets pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
And because Riptide is able to chip down with traps also, you're just taking a bunch of unmitigated damage, And before you know it, you like don't have enough life to play with to take these other arrows that are coming through, and you just die to murky water with dominators and shit like that, right?
Yeah.
So card does very good in the value game, so we're gonna run the triple
Yeah.
remorseless here.
Perfect.
Um, Arrow wise, so Stone Rain. This is the next Armory
Oh,
Deck
the new
card, the
one.
new card here. So
Yeah.
I will zoom into this. So Stone Rain, 0 for 4 again. We like it. If this has an aim counter against Dominate, so again another. So we have two sources of Dom. We used to have nothing before Misfail. So now we have Murky
Hmm.
Water and Stone Rain against Dominate. And when this hits a
Yeah.
hero, they banish a face down card at the beginning of their next end phase. They return it. So it's like a soft disruption, right? So it takes
It's
the
like
card.
intimidate on their own turn, kind of,
It
because then they can't use the
is
card on their own
yes,
turn.
yeah, exactly. It's well, yeah, because the fact that it has the face down card, they get to choose is the only key. It's not random from Intimidate. I think it's the only difference
Oh,
here.
okay. They do pick. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it just says they banish a face down card, so they'll pick the
Okay.
card face down.
Okay.
But this could be really awkward. Like unless they have an extra card that doesn't work super well with their hand. Generally, especially a lot of the fine-tuned aggro decks that
Yeah.
are built to use all their resources and cards are going to be quite frustrated with this card because it,
Hmm.
it does pretty good if it hits. So forcing
Yep.
cards out of hand, and then getting Dominate just gives you that extra flexibility, and being 0 cost just lets you pile on the buffs, right? So if you're
Right.
able
Right. Yeah.
to, 0 cost buff, put this on, pitch, flip it, pay for another buff, something like that. You could really layer it on with this card, and if all else fails, it's still 0 for 4, right? So you're still
Yeah.
able
Exactly.
to do it. And if you don't wanna pay for it, you can just use your sharpshooters. Like if you have no pitch, right? If you have no pitch, you just 0 for 3 buff. You get your Stone Rain and Arsenal, you sharpshooter, flip, get your aim counter, and or oh no, sorry, you get your 0 for 3, then use sharpshooter, put the arrow in your hand face up, get the aim counter, then fire it, right? So
Hmm.
if you don't want to use resources, you still have an outlet to do so, and you can still do
Right.
some pretty nice disruptive hands.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. It's funny how these cards give dominate in an Azalea quote unquote deck when it's like she doesn't really need that. It's more the other rangers that need dominate. So it does
Yep,
feel like this is more of a Riptide card.
it does, doesn't it? I'm telling you.
Yeah.
The Riptide Armory deck. So we're gonna head
Yeah.
into
He's not as
Bob.
beautiful. That's why they didn't put him on the cover of the deck.
He's not as beautiful. It's true.
Yeah.
So we're gonna head on to the buffs next because we're already in the red section here. So we're gonna move on to
Yeah.
the red buffs here. So looking at the first
Buffs.
page, the first one we're gonna want a decent chunk of these to be 0 cost buffs because we're gonna notice that a lot of our yellow buffs are gonna be 1 cost. So like Line
Hmm.
It Up and Deadeye, right?
Deadeye.
So
Yeah.
those are the two that I think I'm remembering correct here. So we're gonna want a
Mhm.
decent chunk of the 0 cost buffs because a lot of the plays that I kind of mentioned earlier, you're gonna want you to activate Riptide off of this, and you're just
Yep.
gonna want the extra flexibility with your 0 cost arrows. So we're gonna start with the Lace with Bloodrot. Very very good value.
Okay. Yeah.
If it hits, it's 5.
Zero
Right?
for five. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
0 for 5 on hit if they don't want to prevent the blood rot. Very good against aggressive decks that don't want to give you a blue pitch for this kind of thing. And if all else fails, it's still 0 for 3 with upside. Right, that's like the base level
Yeah.
of this card. The second one we're gonna do, and I think so. We're gonna skip over the frailty and inertia for now, but we're gonna come back to that in a sec here. But we're gonna go to the second page, and we're going to look at Seek and Destroy. So Seek and
Yeah.
Destroy is kind of that premier buff that if you don't block it, you're kind of just forcing the issue. Now, I think it's interesting because like the main point that I like about this card is that you don't get an arsenal, right? Like at the end of the next phase, you discard all cards in the hand and destroy all cards in arsenal if it hits. So you if they want to play out their turn, they don't get the arsenal at the end of it, and it forces them to give you cards to prevent an awkward turn. So that's kind of like the main upsides
Yeah.
I see from Seek and Destroy
Yeah.
in this specific deck.
There is one you would assume obvious choice for a buff, and that is Melting Point. It is a 1 cost buff and it's red, but it does synergize with counters, and it does present hate for assassins and Katsu, I guess specifically. What do you think about that card? We kind of glossed over it.
I think I want to add one to the sideboard.
Yeah, it is pretty nice. Like on a zero cost arrow, you have the pitch to do this plus your barbed castaway effect to get the aim counter pretty comfortably. So I don't know. I think one of them is pretty good.
Yeah, I it would have to be like with base, like how impactful is them losing a one base power
Like a
weapon?
weapon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so actually I'm gonna shove it in maybe. I don't know if it's gonna be in the sideboard. It might be like a
Yeah,
very
okay.
meta dependent deck,
Yeah, if you
meta
give
dependent
this
pick.
something dominate +4 with this on hit effect, it might be nice. I guess one issue is that if you're playing this before attacking, it's not a reaction, right? So you're
Hmm.
telegraphing that you're coming for their weapon. They might be more incentivized just to block it out. But if it's
Yep.
not a dominated, like the stone arrow or your murky water,
Yep.
could be fine. Yeah.
No, I agree. Um, the next one, oh, it's not actually in Ranger, is it? The next one that I think we
Oh, it's seek
mentioned
and just
already.
yeah, it's a generic.
Seek is yeah, premeditate is the generic here. So we're gonna add 3 premeditate because I think you have to. The ponder is extra good because you have New Horizons. So
Mm,
you're actually able to more consistently have those 6 card plays where you can like do something, and
hmm
then you can pitch to load with Barb Castaway and then use your ponder and arsenal the second card. Like you don't always have to have that card out there. Now,
True.
to be fair, you don't necessarily have snaps to get it out of there
Go
easily.
that way.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it might not always be a good idea to actually use it in the same way that like Lexi did, because Lexi
Yep.
could flip the other card for lightning and go again on that action, or just use snaps or if it was Bolden Shot or something like that. Now, we don't plan
Yep.
on using Falcon Wing, which is the one that has automatic go again. I think it's just
Yeah.
a little bit too shit at the moment.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we're not going to bother with that.
Okay.
Um, Deadeye, there we go. That's the one I mentioned. So we're gonna add 3 Deadeye. There's really no point not to. It is literally the aim count, the main aim counter buff. It's a yellow, so
Oh
you can pitch
yeah.
it for later. +3 aim counter, and you get to Thoughtseize. You get to, or I guess
Yeah.
what's the equivalent here? What's the assassin card? Surgical extraction. You get surgical
Mm.
extraction, right?
Yeah.
Except this is discard instead of banish, I think, or
This
maybe
card
the
was
other way.
played even before aim counters were really a thing. So I think with the aim
Yeah,
counter effect, this is like an insane upside. It almost like triples the damage that you can do with
yeah.
this card. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I agree. And because we're running more blues, a lot of these one cost buffs become a lot more reasonable compared to
hmm
Azalea, where, a lot of your cards were working off yellows. A lot of your hands were working on yellows or like reds or stuff like that.
Right.
But with blues, this becomes infinitely better because you can use Riptide and you can use multiple one cost buffs, one cost, 2 cost arrows, because we have a lot more 2 cost arrows with Battering Bolt and Murky Water. It's quite interesting. So that's the first one. I gotta remember the name of this card. Line it up.
Line it up. Yeah.
One of my locals keeps calling this "light it up," and I got confused.
Yeah, the new one of the new ones from the Azalea deck.
Yes, yeah. So your next arrow. So again, a yellow 1, block 3, majestic, very similar stat line. Next arrow, attack this turn gains +3. You can turn a face down arrow in your arsenal face up if you do put an aim counter. It's interesting that it's kind of like it's like good barbed castaway effect. You know what I mean? You get to
hmm
pay 1 and you flip and you get the aim counter, but you also get +3.
+3.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the difference, right? You get the first line of text. So it's
It's
just like
true.
Riptide Barb Castaway, but you
Plus
get a +3.
3, and it's yellow
Yeah.
that you can pitch for 2 if you want to.
Yeah.
So
Which is
they could have
yeah.
made this card red, and it would still be very good in my opinion. So the fact that it's yellow, I think, is just gravy.
They wanted to copy the Deadeye stat line, which makes sense. Yellow
Uh,
1 gets +3 and some kind of like aim counter related thing. So they're
yeah,
they're they're keeping with like the standard majestic stat
and
line here.
it is a majestic, exactly. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So I think while we're on the yellows, I don't want to forget this card, Codex of Frailty.
Oh yeah.
This card's kind of insane. It's still insane, and the ponder is really good when you have New Horizon.
Uh-huh.
So, or in general, just having a ponder off Riptide because you're able to Barb Castaway and flip that arrow and gain the imp counter and just like buff and
Mm,
not have to use Riptide because you already have the arrow, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
Codex is quite nice because it lets you get back your murky water. Um, the key is it puts it in your graveyard face down. So you can Codex and you get face down, then you can use Barb
Arsenal face
Castaway.
down.
Yeah,
Oh
every
yeah,
hero puts an attack action from your grave face down to Arsenal. Each hero does that
right.
discards a card. So you're able to combine Codex of Frailty super well with Barb Castaway if you want to gain aim counter. So again, you could pitch a blue to you can have your blue. Well, it's a little bit awkward because then you don't have the trick where
The empty hand.
yeah, you don't have the empty hand, but you could still get whatever
Yeah.
card you're looking for Codex. But yeah, it's a little bit awkward. You have to
You
like
can always
buff.
pitch for like a Deadeye or something if you want.
Yeah, you
Use
could do
Riptide's
like
ability, and then you can still play Codex, I guess.
yeah, or you could just like buff Riptide, put a card,
Yeah.
pitch, flip with Barb Castaway, and you can also
Yeah,
use
you can
your
also pay for that. Yeah, it's true.
yeah, pay for Barb Castaway, use Flight Path to give it go again. Like after you give it the aim counter, give that arrow go again, then Codex, and then end up having
Right.
like a Murky Water, like just a two for
Yeah.
just a 2 for 6 with a reasonable card, or you can have like CNC or something like that. So it depends on what kind of piece you're looking for.
True.
But Codex still very very good. I don't think it's ever going to leave in this. It's just ever going to leave this ranger.
No.
Like if you can run it, you are running Codex. If you're assassin or a ranger.
Yeah.
The other cards, I think we want to just like add in some of the more red generic cards that we really like. So E Strike.
Yeah. CNC
and CNC. So E Strike and CNC staple since forever, since they came out.
Yeah.
E Strike even better because you give it go. It's one of your very few sources of natural. I think it is your only source of natural go again on attack action. That lets you, E Strike go again. It's also very, very, very good because you have traps, and there are turns where you'll do a bunch of damage to them, and you'll take cards from your opponent, and your opponent won't do anything, and you have multiple traps in hand, and you're stuck with them, and there's not like you can't really do it. Like you pitch and you have like an extra one. E Strike allows you to, do something with the extra card. Put one to the bottom, game go again. You could Riptide an arrow out.
Yeah.
You can you can +7. You can turn that extra dead weight card into something, right?
Yeah.
And you get to Riptide, right? You still get to play the card from hand, put whatever in arsenal.
Riptide is any card from hand, not even non-attack. It's just any card that you play from
when
hand.
You play,
can E-strike. Yeah.
Exactly. So you can E-strike, you could put something, you can Barb Castaway, you could flip it, and then you can, if you want, you can arsenal for your 6-card hand for New Horizon. It really depends on what you're trying to do at that point. Or you could just use another card and fire an aim countered arrow, which again we have quite a few for. CNC, I don't know if 3 is correct. I might bring it down to 2 depending on what our curve looks like. I might put 1 in the inventory at the moment because I don't know how many blues we're running for sure, but we're going a little bit heavier on CNCs. I think CNC is just kind of necessary at the moment for that extra disruption. I also think we're running Codex, which is very very good with CNC because it kind of always relevant if they are putting a card in their arsenal off Codex if your opponent does it. So
exactly. Yeah.
I think it's always kind of relevant. I don't know. I'm gonna put it back for 3 CNCs.
Why not? Yeah.
Trying to think if I missed any red. I think we're already at 44. We need our blue base too. So let's go into our let's go into the traps. So let's put in our legendary traps, obviously. Right?
Oh yeah. So all of them, I assume, right?
Oh yeah. If you are not playing all 3 of these traps, like there's no point in playing Riptide. You might as well play Azalea. No, you might as well play Azalea. So Buzzsaw Trap, just as a reminder to everyone here. And then defends an attack, not attack action, sorry. Attack with power greater than its base, which is like
everything.
A lot of cards have that ability. Yeah, exactly. It can't gain power this turn. Now again, not as good versus the wide decks, but very good against the tall decks. So this is very good against Assassin. That's a pretty big one because just a nick is actually just a nothing. You buzzsaw, they take 1, and then you just block, and it's just a wipe, honestly. And it's also quite good versus if they have an attack reaction, like pummel, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But really into Assassin, I think, is where this shines for this particular meta, because just a nick is just an obscene card. That's very well liked. It's also pretty good against things like Cast Bones. It's good against Cast Homes, the Victor version. Getting all those might tokens. So again, you can get double duty on that. 3+ mites. This can be a 1-card 6 block and 1 damage. So it's 7 value, right, off your Riptide ability. Quite good.
Oh yeah.
Collapsing Trap, the bane of all go wide deck existence. An attack with go again. The attack here discards their hand. Draws that many -1. So it could, like on a 4-card hand and they like 0/4, you can like turn your 3-card hand into a draws that many cards -1. So it not only gets rid of
draw crap. Draw cards that don't make sense. Yeah.
It not only discards their fine-tuned hand where they were thinking about their lines, but it also gives them 1 less card. So
Yep.
It's just I don't know what else I have to say about this
It's
card.
so good. Yeah, it's so good. Especially to damage the turn before just to set up a crazy turn. It's like you're just throwing their plans out of the water,
Yes,
and they took damage for it. So it's yeah, really, really good.
exactly. And then Spike Pit Trap. So this is the one defends attacking heroes played or activate a reaction. Put the top card in the grave, then they lose they lose life based on cards in the grave with that name.
Yeah.
Probably the weaker of them, but it can do a sneaky amount of damage for decks that have a lot of the
Mm,
same. So it used to be really funny versus like decks like Bonds or especially like into
right.
Assassin, like Isolate stuff like. Although Isolate, they
Yeah.
usually for Azuri, they usually put it to the bottom with their Azuri ability. But like
Oh,
there are
that's fair.
definitely
Yeah.
cards where you can get more value off of this because you get, at the very least you get one, right? So because you lose
Yeah.
X, where X is the number of engraved, so you're gonna get one for sure. So it's gonna be a 0 for 4 regardless. And then the upside
Yeah.
is like it really depends, but
I mean, if it's funny because by removing the yellow bonds of ancestry, now it's like you're kind of limiting how many bonds you can have in your
yellow
grave.
and
So it's
blue,
like,
yellow and
oh,
blue, yeah,
and the blues. It's true. I forgot
yeah,
about the blues. So yeah, you won't get the bonds like 9 bonds in grave deal 9 damage, right?
yeah, yeah. That would be pretty funny.
That's the dream. But yeah,
And we're gonna add his specialization card. Yeah, he's got the Bolton effect where he's just getting so
he's
many
getting
specialization
everything.
cards.
Yeah.
And Intoxicating Shot is his Riptide specialization coming out of Bright Lights. Remember that set? Bright Lights. Um,
Yes.
0 for 4 arrow. When it hits a hero, they create Courage and Quicken. So it's essentially incentivizing them not to block. And that is quite good because, again, Riptide, as I mentioned earlier, does have that issue with you don't have a weapon. So if there are
Yeah.
decks that specifically want to block you out, you're getting very good value off a blue 0 for 4 arrow,
Oh yeah.
right? Um, and into aggressive decks, you're just going to end up pitching this or blocking with this. But into decks that do, on the flip side of that matchup, you are going to get
Mhm.
very good value for that. So overall, very very good arrow. Really, no
Yeah.
reason not to run 3 of them unless you're like super gung ho about another blue arrow that you want to run.
Yep.
So Intoxicating Shot, we're going to add Infecting Shot. Blue
Very good
Infecting
value
Shot.
for a blue. Yeah. One
Yeah,
for five.
I don't like it as the red in this deck, but I love it as the blue because the aim counter
Yeah.
makes it and the aim counter makes it a 1 for 4, right?
Right. That's true. Yeah.
So
One. Yeah.
yeah, 1 for 4 off the aim counter
Plus potential two, I guess.
plus potential 2. So it's a 1 for 6 off an aim counter. I can think of a lot worse things to put an aim counter on, right? Getting
Yeah.
this thing a breakpoint and then you're adding a buff onto that, so it could be 7, it could be 8, it could be whatever. Plenty of worse blue arrows, and like even in Outsiders, I remember like in Limited and all those kind of things, like blue Infecting Shot was still really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna add a couple of sedation shots.
Ooh.
We're gonna add 3 sedation shots. Again, same idea. I like the blue arrows. I like the blue on hit arrows because 1 for 4 is good. I think the inertia. So I think the frailty is not as necessary because we do have Codex of Frailty. So we do
Yeah,
have a
that's true.
source of frailties if we need them, kind of thing.
Yep.
And I think getting a source of inertias is quite good in stopping 5-card hands from aggro decks. Also stopping someone from arsenaling a D-React or something along those lines, right? So if they have a D-React in hand, it kind of forces the issue with a sedation shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it's just mainly a blue 3-block here. Now,
I was thinking, what do you think about drill shots? They're typically played as blues because they still have a good on hit,
the
but
issue
it's not high damage. It's something that they might not even care about. So I don't know.
the issue is that we're already at 56 cards. So
Okay. Yeah.
we're gonna need to add some. So we'll stick with that for the main, and then we'll probably gonna shave off a couple cards here because I think I could probably see like 1 or 2 cards that I kind of want to shave off now that I'm looking at it. We're gonna add some traps in the inventory to get a hybrid thing.
Oh yeah.
We're not gonna add the full sideboard. We're just gonna put in the traps because this is just supposed to be like a base level thing. I'm not gonna sideboard for this deck. I think the first thing you're gonna need. The only sideboard card I will say is Remembrance. I'm going to put 2 in the sideboard. It's not a trap. I know. I'm going to give you this freebie. You need this card, otherwise you'll get fatigued out. So take that as you will. Two
Yep.
Remembrance. I think 3 is overkill. I think 1 is too little.
Yep.
So if you have these and Quiver of Abyssal Depths, you should be fine. So Remembrance allows you to get the non-attack actions also. So you can add the buffs back.
Yep.
And I think, if this deck becomes popular and decks do try to fatigue it, it is quite normal
Sure.
to assume Remembrance coming in. Trap-wise, we have a couple options. I'm just going to add the more obvious ones here. Nope. I want to put you in inventory. So we're going to put 3 inertia traps. We're going to put... I spelled frailty wrong because I cannot see properly. 3 frailty traps. And these are the traps that are in the sideboard because they are matchup dependent. Obviously, like frailty traps are not going to work if they don't have a weapon, for example.
Yeah.
Mainly good against go wide decks, ninja, assassin. These are the decks that you're gonna want to, and you get maximum value from them. Inertia again. Inertia is actually quite good in general for any deck with any buffs, no matter if it's go tall or go wide. So it's good against Art of War also because first of all you get the pip of damage from Riptide, and it still makes sure they don't have an arsenal to set up another like 5-card hand or something like that if you block out. Boulder Trap. So Boulder Trap again, so that's the one with greater base puts -1 on equipment. Doesn't really do much if they don't have a lot of equipment, but it does do quite a bit if they like against things like a Zen or a Guardian or anything along those lines. It does allow you to get more value and have this come in for like 4 to 5, right? So the -1 counter, and then being able to get the 1 pip off of the I guess you could put this on a 2-block equipment too, which would be pretty funny.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, good value.
Very, very good value. And then I think the last one I'm going to put on here is Tar Pit Trap.
Yeah, I was thinking Tar Pit, yeah. None of the other blue ones, I guess, doesn't really... Oh, there's only Rock Slide, I guess. It's like the only... and there's not many blues, yeah.
Yeah, I think Rocks... I can't wait to play Plan for the Worst, but that card is not
I was thinking that too, but
that's in
it
Rosetta.
doesn't... That's right. It's not
out yet.
That's why I didn't put it. Yeah. That makes sense.
Touch typing in trap here. Bloodrot Trap, I think, is way too specific, and they have to activate a reaction. I think that's just like a limited card, honestly. Tripwire Trap is interesting, but I think that the effect doesn't trigger when the attack hits unless they pay. I think not Frailty. Tar Pit Trap is just a better version. Because the next time it hits, it just doesn't trigger.
Yeah.
So it allows you to play a lot more, and it's yellow, so it allows you to play a lot more flexible. So you can pitch it. Whereas Tripwire Trap is like it's red, it does block for 4, but its effects don't they can still pay 1 to avoid it. Whereas Tar Pit is just it happens.
Guaranteed.
There's nothing you can do about it. Exactly. Pendulum Trap is interesting. When a defensive attacking hero is played, activate a reaction, put the top 2 into their graveyard. I don't really like this card, but like we're kind of running out of traps to put in, so we might have to pad it with a little bit of this, but not entirely sure.
I'm not a big fan of this one. It's great for fatiguing, but I don't really know if this. I mean, I guess because it's yellow, it's not so bad. You can pitch it.
Yeah.
It's just I don't see this being that effective into aggro.
I just don't like that it's on reaction. Like it's when this defensive attacking hero is played or activated a reaction, this chain link.
I see what you mean. Yeah,
it's more specific. I don't usually like the reaction ones because a lot of decks just don't care. And I don't know, other than Assassin, I don't really see a ton of use coming out of Pendulum Trap. Pitfall Trap is interesting. I will put 2 Pitfall Traps in the inventory here. So essentially it's a yellow 3-block, and then when defends, deal 2 damage unless they pay 1. So when this defends, so you're automatically getting, the Riptide. Whenever a trap triggers, you deal 1 damage. Right?
I see.
So when this defends, deal 2 damage unless they pay 1. Regardless if they pay 1, Pitfall Trap is still Pitfall Trap. So it's essentially a damage trap, right? Now it's a matter of it's like, okay, so you can take a bunch of damage from this trap, but into very long games where you could play around this to the point where they don't have 1 floating, or you could force them to use 1 floating that they really don't want to, or it's
Yep.
just a yellow. It's just a yellow that you could just pitch for other stuff,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, I
So
agree. Yeah.
I'm kind of cool with like this as our base list. We're not gonna like I'm not gonna fill out. This is just an exercise to kind of build a core kind of idea. I think the rest
Yep.
of the sideboard slots kind of depend on the meta. You could put like I don't know different traps. You could put
Yep.
more D
Based on the
reacts.
meta.
Yeah, you put like more D reacts if you want to. Like a sink below might not be too bad. I think I'm gonna actually cut CNC to 2
Okay.
because I want to add more buffs to the deck.
Currently, we're sitting on 12, I believe.
12 buffs, is that right? So we got 3
Yeah,
lace,
premeditates.
3
Oh, we got
seek.
more than 12, right? We have lace as well.
I want more 0 cost buffs, I think would
Okay.
be a good idea.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, Fletcher Red Tail is interesting. It's a 1 for 4.
Mm.
If it has an aim counter, red cards have -1 defending this. There's a lot of upside for Fletcher Red Tail.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Let's see.
Because red cards have -1 defending it. So even if they don't block with a red card, it's a 1 for 4. Which
Yeah,
is decent. Like just getting that extra 1 point across could be pretty good.
it could be good. It is a 2 block though, which I'm a little about.
Yeah, you could just
Also
get a
no
0 cost
disruption.
2 block. Yeah, no disruption, which is true. It's just getting damage over the line.
Yeah, it's nice
Uh
that it synergizes the encounters, but I feel like it's a little too lackluster. Like it's gotta kind of do something disruptive for me to include it.
yeah, that's fair.
Unless you put the blue one. No, it's still a 2 block. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm kind of liking release the tension. Is that wild?
Let's see.
The next arrow, this arrow attack this turn gains +3 in defense reactions cannot be played from arsenal. Just like more remorseless, essentially. It might be too specific.
It might be, and I think we already have some D-React hate that might make this redundant if we're playing Remorseless and stuff like that.
Yeah, target. We could try. I would probably try point the tip. So that's the 0 for 3. Target face up arrow in your arsenal gains +3 until end of turn. Put an aim counter on it. My issue with that is
yeah.
you need a target. Meaning you can't start Riptide with this though. Like
That is
I
true.
want something. I want something
Yeah.
to start on. So I
Yeah.
guess we're gonna run lace. The other option is we can run Codex of Blood Rod, but I don't really love that idea.
Right. Yeah,
Let's
I
run.
like lace. Which lace did you want to put?
I think I like inertia. Is that wild? Maybe like one inertia, one frailty, and maybe like cut a blue. Maybe like cut a sedation shot. Because we're at 12 blues. I think 11 blues would be fine, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. So realistically, we want to draw 1 buff per turn so that we can Riptide. What would that be? That's like 15 buffs that we would need in the deck to reliably draw 1 per turn.
Yeah, 3, 6, 7, 8,
I want a
11,
bit
14,
more than 15 because you
we
can
have
double
we
up
have
on.
17. We got 17 buffs.
That's pretty good, I think, because you'll get some turns you'll draw 2, which is perfectly fine to play both. So yeah, I think 17 is a good number. 15 is like on the cusp of being too low. 17 is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this, and then you can kind of put in extra traps as needed. And then if you want to cut, essentially you can like sideboard CNC if you don't think you really need like the more arsenal hate.
True.
You can side out lace with frailty and or lace with inertia.
Yep.
Whichever one. Honestly, I could probably put both of those in the inventory.
Yeah.
And then put like a Murkmire in the inventory. So essentially what it'll look like is like if you need the second one if you're facing Illusionist, or you just have the 0-4 in general, that's like a good value arrow for everybody else. I think that's pretty good. Now, the trap wise, I think I'm okay with this trap base. You have like the legendary traps, then you have 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 traps. You're not gonna be running all of them.
Yeah,
reasonably
that's quite a lot.
Reasonably speaking, like 6 to 9 traps is probably the maximum you're gonna be running.
Yeah.
In any one particular matchup, because like you can't draw like a shit ton of traps, otherwise you could be
No,
doomed.
you don't want to draw more than 1 typically.
Yeah, I kind of like this. So we have 2 more card slots, by the way. We can run. You know what? Let's just put some
Oh,
sigils. I literally
some
sigil is sitting
sigils.
right here. I don't know why it's sitting up here. I put in lace and it gave me sigils, but
It's
let's
the Solace.
let's.
Solace.
Oh, so lace. Oh shit, you're right. That's kind of wild.
That's funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think ironically, I think sigil is actually pretty good in the deck, just
Okay.
because for longer matchups, it activates Riptide. So when you play a card from hand,
Oh, that's
so
true. Yeah.
you're still able to sigil, and then you gain +3 life, and then you can do whatever, right? So if you have 2 cards and it's sigil and a red 0 for 4, you could sigil red 0 for 4, and you're still coming in 0 for 7. Essentially,
Yeah.
it's just mixed. It's just you gain
And
3, they lose 4.
there could be some application too to putting a card in your arsenal on your opponent's turn too with Riptide, right? It's not during your own turn. You can do it whenever you play a card from hand. So
You
you
are
can sigil on
correct.
their turn and you can still put an arrow down there. Not sure if it matters too much, but if there's some
It
hand
it
hate, you can hide
it
a
it,
card.
it does because you can cast away it. You can cast away to give it the aim counter, right? So if you have nothing in your arsenal, you
Oh,
could
yeah.
sigil, put something in the arsenal because you can't do. Well, you can, but it will cost you. No, you can't. You could technically do both on
On
Bard
your own turn
Castaway.
too. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you do have the. I guess you have the new. No, you really can't. You can't work it. You can't work it that way. You're allowed to do one, and then you can do the other one later. Is essentially what that means.
Hmm.
Because if you play something, but
Yeah,
essentially you
yeah.
could sigil on their turn, Riptide, put something in the arsenal face down. Then on your turn, you're going to be pitching, flipping it with the castaway, and getting the aim
Hmm.
counter. So if you really want the aim counter, it's actually not bad.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I
Is
like
that the deck?
this. I think
Yeah.
that's the
I
deck.
mean, we do plan to try it out at some point. Probably this week. We'll see if, maybe we can even have an update on the deck list at some point. We can put it in the description or something if
Yeah.
we find some tweaks that we want to do. But this is mainly just to exercise just to play around with the new cards, see what fits, try a deck, and just kind of show our thought process, right, on how we pick the cards.
Yeah. If you like this kind of content and you want to see us play this in specific matchups, let us know in the comment
That's true.
section.
Yeah.
And if you like this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And for wherever you're watching in the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.